In some of the sample code, we use AJAX to either load data from a JSON file or to make calls to an API like Google Maps or Weather Underground, and they use AJAX functions. When developing these kinds of applications, you'll find that you cannot run them locally in your browser. For example, here's the source code for my Directions application. It was built using the External Application Development Toolkit, and in the documentation for that kit, I recommend building your applications outside of FirstClass by commenting out all set data calls and testing before deploying to a live web server. I also uncomment the test data out so as to populate our global values. I enter vancouversites.json as my configuration key, and my application will attempt to load in this data right at the beginning of my code using jQuery's getScript function, which is an AJAX call. If loaded, it populates my site selection lists with the parsed values in that JSON file. When I open this now in my browser, however, and go to my Manage Sites option, we see that the list has not been populated. If I right-click and choose Inspect Elements and go to the Console tab, I see the errors. The errors are because of browser's cross-domain policy. You can't send an AJAX request outside the domain from which the request has been made. So basically, you can't use AJAX locally at all. So you could upload your code to a web server and test on the web server, but that makes it difficult to edit and debug your code. The solution is to run a local web server, and I have found that the best and easiest way to do this is to run an AMP solution stack using either the Mac or Windows solution. An AMP stack is an Apache, MySQL, and PHP solution. There's MAMP for Mac, WAMP for Windows, LAMP for Linux, and all are open source and easy to install, and makes it easy to do local development without compromising your work. There are many different flavors of AMP stacks, but the most common are WAMP for Windows, and it's available here, MAMP for Macintosh, and it's available here, or you could go with XAMPP. It's another solution that's available for Windows, Mac, and Linux. The installation of these is beyond this tutorial, but a quick Google search will get you going very quickly. I'm on my Mac here, and I have MAMP running. If I open my preferences for MAMP, I see that I have Apache running on port 80, and my document root is pointing to my external apps development folder in my Dropbox folder. So if I go to localhost, I'll see all of my external app development projects. If I open that My Directions application and go to Manage Sites, I can see that my site selection list has been populated. So now, if I want to test this out on a FirstClass Web Services installation, I'll have to make sure that my Web Services is running without a certificate, because my Apache server here locally is not. Remember that in the second video of this series we talked about external application server requirements. Fortunately, my FirstClass Web Services can be accessed with or without a certificate. Let me first comment out our test data and save my code. So here I am logged into my FirstClass server as the admin using the desktop client. I have the external applications folder open, and I can open this directions file, which is an instance of the My Directions application. You can see on the configuration tab that it is passing the torontosites.json file, and the code is being hosted on my local host version of Apache. I can now log in as Emily, who belongs to the group that can access this application. I'm making sure that I am pointing to the non-SSL version of my server, so I can take out the S in HTTP and log in. If I launch this application and go to the Manage Sites option, I can see that it's running just fine. Now, of course, it wouldn't run if someone else tried to run it from their computer, unless they too were running a local host version of the application on their own system. The advantage to running this locally too is that I can make changes to my code right in my code editor and save and test without having to upload to a live server. Only when I have fully tested my application running within FirstClass will I upload the solution to a live server, and of course go in and change my install form to point to the correct source.